Do you know that there is always a force acting in opposition to the motion? Of course, I know that you know. Yes, I know that you know. Because it's very clear that when there is always a relative motion, there is a force that tends to stop the force in motion, and that is friction. Of course, in our last video, we talked about a contact force as an example of types of force, and friction was one of that contact force. So friction is an opposition force. Friction does not friction only pops up when there is a relative motion or a force that tends to start a motion. So friction will always come up to oppose the motion. So friction is can be defined as a force that tends to stop the motion, a relative motion of a body. Or you can also say friction is a force that acts at the surface of separation between two objects and tends to oppose the motion of one over the other. And then this friction uh, uh, cause a lot of, okay, there is a positive part of it and a negative part of friction. But then friction, according to some experiment that was carried out, there are 5 laws of solid friction, and one of them is that friction is an opposition to motion. The second law states that friction um, increases to the same extent at which the force it increases to the same extent to which the force is trying to start the motion. And then number 3 state that friction is dependent on the two surfaces in contact. For example, if these two surfaces in contact are smooth, there will be less friction compared to when the two surfaces in contact are rough or painted or polished or oily and all of that. So the surfaces of bodies in contact also applies to friction, why friction could be in the increase or less. And then the fourth law of friction states that friction is independent on the area of the two surfaces in contact. And then the last one said that friction is proportional to the normal reaction arrow. And that number 5 is where the mathematical equation comes in. But then that has to be solved with the board and for everybody to see. Or maybe you can employ me as a teacher and I'll come to your house and teach you. But there is an importance of friction. And the importance of friction is that friction allows us to move. We can move and then we can stop moving because of friction. For example, for you to start walking and stop walking, you need friction. If not, there's going to your foot will be slippery, or your slippers will be slippery with the ground, and then that will result to fall. Biology can tell you that the reason why we move is because of the support system, the skeletal system. But I'm telling you also, according to physics, the reason why you can move and stop moving at when due is because of the presence of friction. Frictions allow the tires to grip on the surface of the road, and then for it to allow movement. And then uh, friction also helps in it helps in machine to work. For example, the fan belt of your car engine can only work because of friction. And then the disadvantage part of friction is that machine tends to do useless work because of friction, because they want to overcome friction before they begin to work. For example, there are frictions that needs to be overcome before a body starts moving over another body, and that kind of friction is called static or limiting friction, and it's always the greater part of friction. And then the second one is that there is a frictional force that needs to be overcome, that must be overcome for a body to continue to move in uniform motion in a straight line, for a body to continue to move in uniform speed, and that kind of friction is called dynamic or kinetic friction. And static or limiting friction is always greater than that of dynamic friction. And so in the fifth law of solid friction that states that frictional force is proportional to the normal reaction, and then there is a constant in that equation which is called coefficient of static friction, or it can also be coefficient of limiting, coefficient of and dynamic friction, depending on the kind of friction that needs to be overcome. But static friction is always greater than dynamic friction. Okay, then we have how to overcome friction. There are ways to overcome friction. Mind you, a machine that is void of friction or that does not have any frictional effect is known as an ideal or perfect machine, because if machines are trying to overcome friction before they can start working, that excess force, they are exerting a force that they're supposed not to, and that force leads to the inefficiency of the machine. And so if there is no friction in in any kind of machine, that machine is a perfect machine and the efficiency is 100%. That's why if a body, or let me say an object, is overcoming friction for a long period of time, a time will come that that body or that object will begin to make noise because of the presence of friction. That noise will become an annoying noise, and at the end of the day, a lot of work is done by the machine, and then the machine will wear out. Like for example, the tires of a car always wear out because of constant friction between the surface of the tire and that of the road. Even your shoe, and you can see other examples. For example, friction also can be functional when you are sharpening your tools. For example, your knife, for those of you that uses knife for your cooking, okay, it is friction that helps you to sharpen the knife, and then friction will wear out the surface of that metal. A time will come that you won't be able to use that particular cutting tool because of the size of that cutting tool will reduce and it will be inconvenient for you to use. So there's a way to overcome friction, and one of them is ball bearing. There are some machines and some moving parts that we use ball bearing to prevent lot of frictions. So for example, you can see your bicycle has ball bearings. So that's an example of that is a way of overcoming friction. And then some surfaces of moving part can be polished. Some moving machines can use fan belts in some moving part of machines to reduce friction. And then some designs of technology, locomotions. Okay, let me say for example cars, airplane and ship. They all use a kind of the design is called streamline, so that it will reduce friction. Streamline. So you will look at the pictures below so that you'll be able to understand what I'm trying to explain. So friction has a positive part of it and a negative part of it. But friction, for you to understand it better, friction simply means an opposition to motion. Friction always comes up when there is a relative motion or there is a force that tries to produce motion. So that is just a simple part of physics I'm trying to explain to you guys. Thank you for watching.